March Madness is all about the unexpected. Buzzer beaters, monumental upsets, and underdogs making history. Every year, mid-majors from all over the country deliver the most unforgettable moments, shocking blue bloods and turning future real estate agents into legends of March. In this video, I break down every mid-major team in the tournament, highlighting their star players and team play style so you can spot this year's Cinderella story before it happens. First mid-major on the list is the Bryant Bulldogs. They operate a high-tempo offense that averages 82.5 points per game, ranking 18th nationally. They emphasize quick transitions and capitalize on fast breaks. They play through their star power in their guards, Earl Timberlake, the America East Player of the Year and former four-star recruit, who averages 15.5 points, 8.4 rebounds, and 4.7 assists per game. Rafael Pinzon transfers from St. John's, a sharpshooting guard that leads the team with 18.7 points per game and shoots about 40% from three-point range. The strengths of this team is that they're a strong rebounding team. They average 41.5 boards per game, out-rebounding opponents by an average of 5 per game. After losing to Grand Canyon 112-66, Earl Timberlake led a players-only meeting, inspiring the team to bounce back, resulting in a 4-0 start in conference play. This leadership shows on the court as the team relies on Timberlake to lead them in many ways throughout the game. I can see this team making it to the round of 32. Next up is Drake, arguably the best mid-major in the country. They have 30 wins, 3 losses. They have impressive wins over Vandy, Kansas State, and 2 wins over Bradley. They're a completely new roster and new coach. They got Coach Ben McCollum, who's a successful coach at the D2 level, who brought his players along with him. They're a dangerous team with every player on their team being able to defend at a high level and score in a patient manner. They allow the second least points per game at 58.4. They play with their own pace and shoot the ball well. Their guard Bennett Sturz is one of the best players in the country. He averages 19.1 points, 4.4 rebounds, 5.7 assists, 2.2 steals, and shoots 38% from the three ball. He's an absolute dog because he plays the entire game. He averages 39.3 minutes. They also got a forward, Daniel Abreu, 10.4 points, 3.3 rebounds, and 1 assist. And they got a guard, Mitch Mascari, 9.8 points, 2.2 rebounds, and 1.3 assists. Their defense rating is 95.5, which is 16th. They shoot 53% from 2, which is 42nd in the country, and they're an elite mid-major team. They're dangerous, and I think they have Elite 8 potential. Next up are the High Point Panthers. This is their school's first trip to the dance. They have quality wins over UAB, North Texas, Appalachian State, and American. Their main player is Keza Giffa. He's a French guard who leads them in scoring with 14.8 points per game, and he averages 17.5 on away games. They also have Bobby Pettiford, who's their top playmaker, who averages 3.4 assists per game. And their center is the massive Jocelyn Bodo Bodo, who's 7 foot, 240, defensive anchor that averages 1.4 blocks per game. They have 27 points from the bench, which is 31st in the country, and they're an explosive team with strong rebounding and efficient offense and balanced scoring. This team goes on runs, as seen in the Big South Championship game when they went on a 24-2 run. I can see this team making the Sweet 16. Next up is Liberty. They're 28-6. They have impressive wins over Seattle, McNeese, and Kansas State. They're currently on a 6-game win streak. They're a really strong defensive team with a defensive rating of 93.1, which is the 5th best in the country. They shoot 59% from 2, which is the 6th best in the country. They have 10.5 made threes per game, which is 14th best in the country. 38.5 from 3, which is 12th best in the country. They average 16.8 assists per game, 20th best in the country. They do struggle on offensive rebounds, only 6.6 per game, leading them to be the 361st best in that in the country. And they have balanced minutes and scoring. Their guard, Talon Peter, shoots 75% from 2, averages 14 points, 4.2 rebounds, and assists per game. Their guard, Caden Metheny, averages 13.2 points, 3 rebounds, and 2 assists. And Zach Cleveland averages 11 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists. They're a solid team that could probably maybe make the Sweet 16. Next up are the Lipscomb Bisons. The Bisons play a balanced offense that averages 79.3 points per game with a shooting percentage of 47.3. They're good from behind the arc, averaging 10 threes per game at a 36% rate. Defensively, they allow 67.3 points per game, proving that they're a solid defensive team. Their key player is Jacob Ognacevic. He's the ASUN Player of the Year, leading the team with 20.1 points and 8 rebounds per game. Also, Joe Anderson, a dynamic guard who averages 4 assists, contributes significantly in scoring, especially during the ASUN tournament, where he was red hot, averaging 25 points, 4 assists, and 4 rebounds. The strengths of this team is that they're a high free throw shooting team, averaging about 80%, ranking 6th nationally. They have 5 players averaging double digits, making them hard to defend. They have 4 players with 45 plus made 3-pointers on 35% plus shooting. And you can't stop this team when they're hot. They are undefeated when shooting 39% from 3, and they have impressive wins over Wofford, Chattanooga, and Duquesne. Next up is Wofford. They have an offensive rating of 114.4, which is the 43rd best in the country. They run a slow-paced offense that fires off a lot of threes. They're 26th in the country in 3 points attempted, and they're 33rd in the country in 3 points made per game. They're a really terrible free throw shooting team. They shoot 66%, ranking 342nd in the country. Their guard, Corey Tripp, averages 14.3 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists. And their center, Kyle Filewich, averages 12 points, 9.4 rebounds, and 3.1 assists. And he shoots free throws underhanded like Rick Barry, but unfortunately at an inefficient rate, shooting an abysmal 30% from free throw. They also got another guard, Dylan Bailey, who averages 11.3 points, 2.5 rebounds, 1.5 assists. Next up is UC San Diego. I think they're the best mid-major in the country. It's their team's first trip to the big dance and their first year eligible for it, as they've only been in D1 for 5 years. This team is similar to last year's McNeese team. They dominate all metrics and statistics. Their defensive rating is 91.4, which is the best in the country. They only average 61.6 points against them, which is sixth best in the country. Their offensive rating is 118.5, which is 13th best in the country. And they score 80 points a game, which is 44th best in the country. They attempt 33s per game, which is 12th in the country, and they make about 11 per game, which is 8th best in the country. They shoot 57% from 2, which is 27th best in the country, 36.5% from 3, which is 58th best in the country. They average 10 steals per game, which is 3rd best in the country. They average 16 assists per game, which is 55th best. They allow the second least steals by opponents at only 4.5 per game, and they allow the 7th least field goals per game at 21.2. They hold teams to 39.5% from the field, which is the 14th best, and 45% from 3, which is the 10th best. Their forward, Anawaniwa Tate Jones, averages 19.7 points per game, 5.4 rebounds, 3.6 assists, and shoots 58% from the field. And then they got Tyler McGuy, who averages 16.5 points, 4 rebounds, 1.8 assists, and shoots 39% from 3 on 9 attempts per game. He's also an 85% free throw shooter. They also have Hayden Gray, who averages 10.9 points per game, 3.2 steals, 3.4 assists, 3.2 rebounds per game. He shoots 40% from 3 and leads the entire country in steals. They have impressive wins over James Madison, Toledo, Utah State, and 3 wins over UC Irvine. I think this team can make the Elite Eight. Next up is McNeese. Will Wade brought back his team and his winning culture to the tournament for the second year straight. 50.6% of their minutes played and 49% of their scoring are from last year's returning players. They average 77.2 points per game, which is 90th in the country, and they allow 64 points per game, which is 16th best in the country. An impressive win over North Texas and close rank losses to Bama by 8 and Mississippi State by 3. They have an aggressive defense. They're like a St. John's light. They play an aggressive tempo and they play positionless basketball. They're 74th in 3-point percentage at 36%. They average 9 steals per game, which is 22nd best in the country, and they allow the 14th least amount of field goals per game at 22. They're a really good statistic team. They're top 150 in most stats. They have a guard, Javon Garcia, who averages 13 points per game, 3.5 rebounds, and 2 assists. Another guard, Sincere Parker, 12.1 points, 2.5 rebounds, and zero point 0.6 assists. And they got Christian Shumate, 10.5 points per game, 6.3 rebounds, and 1 assist per game. And he shoots 71% from 2. And then DJ Richards, 10.1 points per game, 2.2 rebounds, and assists per game, and he shoots 45% from 3. I think this team is just as strong as last year, but they didn't really show much last year, and I think they can make the round of 32. Next up is Montana. They're led by guard Money Williams, who averages 13 points per game, 3 assists per game, and the offense really just runs through him. They ended the season winning 14 of their last 15 games. They hold opponents to 33% from three. They have a balanced scoring output with four players averaging 11 plus and two averaging 9 plus. They're an efficient team that shoots 50% from the field, and they're actually the second best in the country in field goal percentage. And a weakness is a lack of size, but smaller teams have proven to been able to upset teams in March, as seen through Fairleigh Dickinson versus Purdue. I think this team has Sweet 16 potential. Next up are the Troy Trojans, who are 23-10. They have wins over Toledo and 2 wins over Arkansas State. On average, teams score 65.4 points against them, which is 25th in the country. And their defensive rating is 97, which is 25th best in the country. They average 9.4 steals per game, which is 11th best in the country, 38.6 rebounds per game, which is 30th best in the country, and they shoot 22 free throws per game, which is the 53rd best in the country. Their guard, Tayton Connerway, averages 14.3 points, 4.6 rebounds, 5 assists, and 3 steals, which is third best in the country. And then Miles Rigsby averages 12 points and 4 rebounds. Next up are the Yale Bulldogs. Yale's gone back dancing after winning the Ivy League back-to-back years. This team boasts a high-scoring offense, averaging 82.2 points per game, ranking 22nd nationally. Defensively, they limit opponents to 69.7 points per game, reflecting a balanced approach on both ends of the floor. They have March legend John Poulikitis leading the team with 19 points per game. They also got Nick Townsend, who averages 7.3 rebounds per game, and Bez Mbang, who averages 5.7 assists per game. You can't count out Ivy League schools in March. Past 2 years, they've won their first game, Princeton over Arizona and Yale over Auburn last year. These Ivy League players are well coached, and they're smart players who can dissect a scouting report in a short turnaround teams have from Selection Sunday to Thursday or Friday. Next up is one of the most well-known mid-majors in the country, Grand Canyon. They have wins over Stanford, St. Louis, Bryant, Hawaii, Norfolk State, and Western Kentucky. They play with momentum and prone to go on runs. They basically ran back their team from last year. 64% of minutes played and 68% of their scoring is from last year's roster. They have a defensive rating of 94, which is ninth in the country. They average 78.8 points per game, which is 61st in the country. And they allow 68.7 points per game, which is 75th best in the country. Their guard, Tyon Grant Foster, is having an off year, but he's still producing good stats. 14.6 points per game, 6 rebounds, 2 assists. Their forward, Kobe Coles, averages 14.8 points, 5.8 rebounds, and 2.3 assists. Their guard, Rayshawn Harrison, averages 11.4 points, 2.8 rebounds, and 3 assists per game. Their forward, Duke Brennan, averages 10.5 points per game and 9.2 rebounds. Rugged wing, Luke War, averages 8 points, 4 rebounds, and an assist per game. Next up is Robert Morris. They average 76.9 points per game, and they allow 70.4 points per game. They have two standout D2 transfers, Amarian Dickerson, the Horizon Defensive Player of the Year, that averages 13 points per game, 6 rebounds per game, a steal a game, and 2.5 blocks per game. And they also have Josh Omojafo, who averages 11.4 points per game. They're 16-1 in their last 17 games, so they're red hot, just in time for the big dance. And their team's success really relies on their versatile guard, Cam Woods, who averages 15 points per game, 4.6 rebounds, 5.1 assists per game, and 1.7 steals. They have four players that average 11 or more points, and their momentum could take them into the first weekend of the tournament. Next up are the Akron Zips. They finished the season 28-6. They're an offensive-oriented team that shoots a lot and makes a lot. They attempt the sixth most amount of field goals per game and the seventh most attempted threes per game. They have balanced minutes and scoring. They are an undersized team, but that doesn't really play as much of a factor in March, I feel like. They average 84.8 points per game, which is sixth in the country. They have an offensive rating of 116.2, which is 26th in the country. They average 31 field goals made per game, which is third in the country. They shoot 47% from field goal, which is 50th in the country. They average 11 threes per game, which is fifth in the country. and they average 39 rebounds per game, which is 24th in the country. They also average 18.2 assists per game, which is fourth in the country. Nate Johnson, he averages 13.8 points per game, 5.1 rebounds, and 3.4 assists. He's clutch. He scored the game-winning Eurostep runner in the MAC championship. Next up is Mount St. Mary's. They have a win over Miami. They're 25th in defensive rebounds per game at 27.4, and they have a balanced scoring output of Dola Adebayo, 13.1 points and 7 rebounds. Carmelo Pacheco, who shoots 46.4% from three, averaging 10 points, 1.7 rebounds, and 1.3 assists. And Dallas Hobbs, averaging 12.4 points per game, 3.7 rebounds, and 3.3 assists. Next up is VCU. They're a well-experienced team, and they built a pretty solid team from the A10. Their team's roster has a blend of returning players and some transfers that add to their depth and versatility. Utah State transfer Max Shulga is the A10 Player of the Year. He averages 14 points per game, 4.6 rebounds per game, and 4 assists per game. Joseph Vamasal averages 15 points and 5 rebounds per game. This team averages 13.3 offensive rebounds, which is 20th best in the country. They average 9.5 threes per game, which is 42nd best in the country. And VCU has established itself as one of the nation's top defensive teams, holding opponents to an average of 62.5 points per game, which is ninth best in the country. Their defensive rating is 93, which is fifth best in the country, and their offensive rating is 115.5, which is 32nd best in the country. This team dominates metrics, and they're a pretty solid team. Next up is Norfolk State. They finished the season 23-10. They live and die by their two-point shot. They have an offensive rating of 112.9, which is 64th. They have a defensive rating of 100.5, which is 76th. They shoot 49% from the field, which is 12th best in the country. They average 22.4 twos made per game, which is 10th in the country. And they shoot 55.6% from two, which is 40th best. They average 5.5 threes made per game, which is 350th in the country. And their best player is Brian Moore Jr., who averages 18.5 points, 3.7 rebounds, and 3 assists. Next up is St. Francis. This team's actually below 500 with a 16-17 record. Some pros is that they have 3 players averaging double digits or more. Their guard Riley Parker averages 13.4 points, 3.5 assists, and 3.4 rebounds. They got Juan Cranford, 10 points per game, 4.1 rebounds, and 2 assists. There's nothing too special about this team, honestly, but they were down in the Northeast Conference tournament, but rallied in every game, winning their last 3 games by 3 points each, and they know how to finish games. Next up is SIU Edwardsville. They're a defensive-minded team. They hold teams to 66.1 points per game, which is 36th in the country. They have a defensive rating of 96.7, which is 23rd in the country. They're 34th in the country in rebounds per game at 38.5, so that indicates they're a strong rebounding team. And the offense runs through Rayshawn Taylor, who averages 19.3 points per game, 4.5 rebounds, 3.8 assists, and he shoots 85% from the free throw line. Next up is Alabama State with a final record of 19-15. They have a win over Omaha and a win over Lamar. They average 9 threes made per game, which is 64th best in the country. Their guard, Amar Knox, is their best player, who averages 14.5 points per game, 2.1 rebounds, and 2.5 assists. They have another skilled guard, giving them a combo guard duo, which is CJ Hines, who averages 14.3 points, 3 rebounds, and 2.5 assists. This team's skilled in rebounding and defense. Next up are the Omaha Mavs. They have an offensive rating of 112.7, which is 65th in the country. They're 54th in three-point percentage at 37.1%. Their forward Markel Sutton averages 19.1 points and 8 rebounds per game. Their guard J.J. White averages 14 points, 2 rebounds, and 4 assists. And their other guard Tony Osborne averages 12 points per game, 3.4 rebounds, and 1.4 assists. This team's on a 6-game win streak, and they're hot just in time. Next up are the UNC Wilmington Seahawks. The Seahawks are a balanced team that averages 79.4 points per game, ranking them 52nd nationally. Defensively, they allow 70 points per game, which is 116th in the country. Their key player is Donovan Newby, a dynamic guard that leads the team with 14.6 points and 3.5 assists per game. They also got a pretty talented small forward in Sean Moore, who racks up 6.5 rebounds and 8 points per game. They have a balanced scoring and minutes distribution. They're effective at rebounding, averaging 38.7 rebounds per game, ranking them 36th nationally. Weakness is that their three-point percentage is 33.9%, which is on the lower end. They allow an average of 8.2 three-pointers a game, showing they struggle to defend the perimeter. Next up is American. They have impressive wins over Harvard and George Washington. They average 67.3 points against per game, which is 49th best in the country. They shoot 76% from the free throw line, which is 56th in the country. And Matt Rogers, their forward, is their main point of attack scoring wise, as he averages 17 points, 5.6 rebounds, and 1.3 assists.